Aman Varma believed his secrets were perfectly buried. Neha Varma trusted the life she had built for years, and Riya's son danced toward a future she thought was finally within reach. Three lives, moving in separate directions, unknowingly raced toward the same hotel room on the same night. What began as ambition, loneliness, and misplaced hope would soon collide in a moment that could not be undone, turning desire into destruction and exposing how one hidden affair was enough to shatter every illusion they held onto. The story begins in a peaceful Canadian city where life moved in an orderly and predictable rhythm. Streets were quiet, mornings followed routines, and neighbors believed they knew one another well. In one modest yet comfortable home lived a man who had built a reputation as dependable and hardworking. His career demanded long hours, frequent travel, and constant pressure, but it also provided financial comfort and social respect. To most people, his life appeared complete and successful. His marriage had lasted many years and was built on shared responsibilities rather than emotional closeness. Over time, conversations became brief and practical, focused on schedules, bills, and obligations. Moments of warmth slowly faded, replaced by silence that felt normal simply because it had existed for so long. Neither partner openly acknowledged the distance growing between them, choosing instead to accept it as part of adult life. The man convinced himself that this quiet emptiness was harmless. He believed loyalty was defined by stability, not emotional presence. His wife, equally absorbed in her own routines, noticed the change but did not question it deeply. From the outside, there were no loud arguments or visible problems, only a quiet absence of connection that went unnoticed by everyone else. As weeks turned into months, the man found comfort in being away from home. Business trips became more frequent, offering him escape rather than exhaustion. Airports and hotels felt easier than facing the silence waiting at home. He told himself this restlessness was normal, a temporary phase caused by stress and age. Yet beneath this calm surface, something fragile was forming. Small choices, ignored emotions, and unspoken dissatisfaction were slowly shaping a path towards something far more dangerous. What seemed like a stable life was already cracking, and neither of them could see how close they were to the edge of irreversible change. The business trip to India was meant to be routine, another brief interruption in a busy professional schedule. The man arrived with a packed itinerary, meetings planned from morning to evening, leaving little room for anything unexpected. One evening, however, he was invited to attend a cultural program arranged for international guests. It was presented as a formal gesture of hospitality, something to be observed politely and quickly forgotten. As the performance began, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. The dancer moved with controlled precision, her expressions changing with every movement, telling a story without words. The audience remained silent, drawn into the intensity of her presence. For the man, the performance triggered something unfamiliar. It wasn't just admiration for talent. It was a feeling of being seen and emotionally awakened after years of numb routine. After the event, introductions were brief and professional, but the impression lingered. The dancer carried herself with discipline shaped by years of struggle and dedication. Behind the elegance was a life built on sacrifice, training, and constant uncertainty. The man felt curiosity grow into fascination, convincing himself that this connection was harmless, rooted only in cultural appreciation. In the days that followed, he found excuses to remain in contact. Messages were exchanged under the justification of supporting artistic projects and international opportunities. Each interaction brought excitement that his regular life lacked. The distance between their worlds made the situation feel unreal, as though it existed outside the rules of consequence. By the time his trip ended, something had already changed within him. Returning to Canada felt heavier than usual. The quiet of his home now felt more noticeable, more uncomfortable. What began as a single evening of art and admiration had planted a seed of desire and escape. Without realizing it, after returning to Canada, The man attempted to settle back into his familiar routine, but something felt different. His daily life continued as before, yet his thoughts frequently drifted elsewhere. The connection formed during his trip did not fade with distance. Instead, it quietly grew stronger, fueled by private messages and carefully timed calls that fit between work obligations and late nights. What began as occasional contact slowly became a regular part of his life. The dancer shared fragments of her world, her training, her ambitions, and the uncertainty that surrounded her future. He offered encouragement and guidance, presenting himself as a source of stability and opportunity. Over time, the connection shifted from emotional support into something deeper, something he avoided naming but clearly understood. Eventually, he proposed that she visit Canada, framing it as a chance for professional growth and cultural exchange. The idea seemed reasonable, even generous, and allowed him to justify his actions to himself. When she arrived, he carefully arranged her stay, keeping every detail hidden from his home life. Their meetings were planned around his work schedule, precise and secretive. Living two lives required constant attention. At home, he maintained his role as a reliable husband, never raising suspicion through careless behavior. Outside that space, he became someone else entirely, driven by excitement and emotional escape. Each lie made the next one easier, forming a pattern that felt both thrilling and exhausting. The separation between these two worlds began to blur. The dancer grew more dependent on his presence and promises, while he found himself emotionally invested beyond his control. What he once believed was a temporary escape now demanded permanence. He underestimated how fragile his balance truly was. Every choice pulled him further away from the life he had built, yet turning back seemed impossible. The hotel became the place where reality was carefully avoided. It stood away from familiar neighborhoods, chosen for privacy and anonymity rather than comfort. To the man, it felt like a controlled space where his two lives would never collide. Each visit followed a strict pattern, timed precisely to avoid suspicion. The room offered temporary freedom, a place where he believed consequences could not reach him. Inside that space, time seemed suspended. The outside world felt distant, almost unreal. He convinced himself that as long as everything stayed contained within those walls, no harm would follow. The dancer trusted the promises he repeated through actions rather than words. She saw the hotel meetings as proof of commitment, unaware that secrecy was never the same as safety. As weeks passed, the meetings became more frequent. What once felt exciting slowly grew tense. The man carried constant fear beneath his calm appearance. Every phone notification and unexpected delay increased his anxiety. Still, he continued, believing control meant survival. He underestimated how patterns, no matter how careful, always leave traces. Unnoticed by him, small mistakes began to form. Receipts were misplaced, schedules overlapped, and absences became harder to explain. The hotel staff saw familiar faces returning too often, and casual anonymity began to fade. The illusion of invisibility weakened with every visit. The dancer sensed changes in his behavior. His attention felt divided, his reassurances less convincing. Yet she remained hopeful, trusting the future he implied without confirming. The room that once symbolized escape now held growing uncertainty. The hotel, meant to protect the secret, was quietly becoming its weakest point. Walls that once felt secure were now witnesses to mounting pressure. The man failed to see that secrecy demands perfection, and perfection never lasts. What he believed was a safe hiding place was slowly turning into the center of an inn. To avoid attention, the man chose places that felt temporary and anonymous. Hotels became his preferred refuge, spaces where names were written in ledgers, but lives remained invisible. One particular hotel, near the city center, felt ideal. It was busy enough to blend into the background, yet quiet enough to offer privacy. He booked rooms under work-related excuses, always choosing short stays that would not raise questions. Inside the room, time felt suspended, The outside world seemed distant, reduced to muted traffic sounds and filtered daylight through heavy curtains. The meetings were carefully scheduled, always rushed yet emotionally intense. He convinced himself that this arrangement was controlled and safe. The hotel, to him, represented separation from responsibility, a sealed space where consequences could not enter. Each visit strengthened his sense of false security. The staff recognized him but never questioned him. Receipts were hidden among business expenses. The dancer, isolated in a foreign country, relied on these meetings as her only sense of stability. What he viewed as a secret escape slowly became the center of her world, increasing the emotional pressure he tried to ignore. Unnoticed by him, small risks began to pile up. Patterns formed in booking dates, locations, and timing. The hotel that once felt invisible was now part of a routine. His confidence grew careless. He underestimated how easily controlled systems could expose human behavior. What he failed to realize was that secrecy does not erase reality. It only delays it. Every visit left behind traces, digital and human. The room that once offered comfort was quietly becoming a stage set for something far darker. Without knowing it, he had chosen the exact place where his carefully divided life would finally collapse. The hotel meetings became the foundation of his hidden world. Carefully chosen locations offered privacy, distance from familiar neighborhoods, and the illusion of control. These rooms were temporary spaces where reality felt suspended. Inside them, time moved differently, free from responsibilities and consequences. He convinced himself that because these moments were contained within four walls, they could not affect the rest of his life. Each visit was planned with precision. Reservations were made under different names, payment methods carefully selected to avoid detection. He memorized schedules, checked surroundings, and maintained strict routines to ensure secrecy. The dancer trusted these arrangements, believing they represented safety and commitment. For him, the hotel rooms became emotional shelters where he escaped the growing emptiness of his marriage. Yet the sense of security was false. Every visit added pressure, increasing the risk of discovery. Small mistakes began to appear. Receipts were misplaced, travel explanations sounded rehearsed, and stress showed in his behavior. The rooms that once felt safe now carried tension. The walls seemed closer, the silence heavier. Unnoticed by him, patterns were forming. Repeated visits to the same area created traces. Hotel staff remembered faces. Digital records quietly stored evidence. What he believed was a controlled secret was, in reality, a fragile structure built on chance. The dancer sensed unease but relied on his reassurances. She believed the future would eventually justify the secrecy. He shared promises he was not prepared to fulfill, further entangling them both. The hotel room that night felt no different from the others, calm on the surface, yet unstable beneath. What neither of them realized was that the safety they believed in no longer existed. The walls had already absorbed too many secrets. The illusion was about to break, and when it did, there would be no place left to hide. He chose hotels that felt anonymous, places where faces blended into hallways and questions were never asked. The locations were always distant from his neighborhood, carefully selected to avoid coincidence. Inside those rooms, time seemed suspended, detached from the reality waiting outside. For him, the hotel represented control, a space where his separate lives could exist without touching. He convinced himself that as long as everything stayed behind closed doors, no harm would follow. Each visit became more deliberate. Reservations were made under different names, payments split across accounts, and schedules adjusted with precision. The dancer trusted his planning, believing these meetings were steps toward a shared future. He reassured himself that secrecy was temporary, a necessary phase before making clear decisions. Yet the longer it continued, the more fragile the arrangement became. The hotel room carried a strange tension. Comfort mixed with unease, excitement shadowed by constant alertness. Every sound in the hallway felt louder than it should, every knock sending a rush of fear. Despite this, he continued returning, unable to resist the escape it offered. The risk itself added intensity, blinding him to how close he was to exposure. Unknown to him, patterns were forming. Dates repeated, locations overlapped, and digital traces quietly accumulated. The illusion of invisibility was cracking, even as he felt confident in his careful planning. The hotel, once a symbol of safety, was becoming the most dangerous place of all. It would soon serve not as a hiding place, but as the setting where everything he tried to control would unravel at. The hotel became their chosen refuge, a neutral space that felt detached from consequences. It was always selected carefully, far from familiar neighborhoods and places connected to his daily life. Inside those walls, time seemed suspended. He convinced himself that this separation made the situation manageable, that keeping the affair contained within temporary spaces prevented real harm. Each visit followed the same pattern, planned in advance and erased from memory once it ended. With every meeting, the illusion of control grew stronger. The dancer began to see the hotel not just as a meeting place, but as proof of his commitment. To her, these moments suggested a future slowly taking shape. To him, they represented escape, a version of life free from responsibility. He ignored the growing imbalance between their expectations, choosing comfort over clarity. The secrecy demanded constant vigilance. Receipts were discarded, timelines adjusted, and explanations rehearsed. He told himself that as long as everything remained hidden, nothing could truly collapse. Yet the effort required to maintain this hidden world was exhausting. Anxiety followed him even during ordinary moments, and brief relief came only when he was away from home. The hotel room, once a symbol of freedom, began to feel confining. Walls that once protected now felt like witnesses to decisions he could no longer undo. Each visit deepened the risk, but stopping felt harder than continuing. He believed the danger still lay somewhere in the future, unaware that the consequences were already moving closer. What he failed to realize was that secrecy leaves traces. Patterns form, habits repeat, and even the most careful plans begin to unravel. The very place he trusted to keep his life divided was silently becoming the center of everything about to be exposed.